What up, everybody? Michael Cerezo here, going to discuss what I use for my portrait work. You've seen from my last video, which was quite a while ago, what I use for my wildlife, this guy right here. But what do I use on general everyday portraiture? That's an important question because that's the mainstay of what I do. The wildlife I love doing the scenics. But for the past 29 years of being a professional photographer, what do I use for that? i.e. for the children, for head and shoulders, for portraiture, whether it be engagements, weddings, senior portraits. Well, I can tell you I've used many different cameras. When I was on film, I dealt with Hasselblad, used film. That's what I used. When I went digital, I got in back in the day when it was the Kodak 560 made by Canon, and used that. It had 3 autofocus points. It was rather slow for autofocus. But things have progressed. I've always been with the 1D bodies. Love those the best, the most durable. And like I say, I beat the crap out of my equipment. There's many times I'm shooting out in the mist. I was in Boston one time photographing families over a week's time. Back then I had the 5D Mark II, and it succumbed to rain damage. It just could not handle it. Fried one or two of the boards. Went to the 5D Mark III, still missed my 1DS bodies, so I went back with a 1DX. Again, for what I do, having both the wildlife and the portrait, the 1DX does superbly. Especially for children, seniors, it's a nice file size. I can get my file size so that I can go up to a 24 by 36, if not bigger, for a wall portrait. Many times that's what I'm doing for the seniors, doing gallery, or for the children. I can get a superb file knowing how to run the camera by using that. Now, what is the lens that I use? Well, there are many lenses out there, and the whole rage now is 1.0, the 1.8, the 1.4s, the 1.2s, the 85 millimeters, the 135s. But what I can say is, and overselling many years wall portraits from this file size and this lens, this is my diehard. This is my I'm not going to leave home without it lens for portraiture. That is the 70-200 on the 1DX. The 70-200 2.8. I started using back in the day, it was non-image stabilizing, 70-200 2.8. Loved that lens. I wore that lens out, got another one, wore that one out. And now I have a version 2 image stabilizing 2.8. Very sharp, very quick. And that's what counts, especially with children. And just to tell you where I'm at and why I'm using this camera, I went to Sony a couple of years ago. I went over to that side of things. I know I have a lot of friends doing that, and that's cool. I found it slower. I used the A7 Mark II, had the 70-200 f4. I believe it was the 16-35, and then the 135 Zeiss 1.8. Loved that lens, super sharp, but it was slow. Had to use an adapter on it because it was an A mount. Anyhow, I found it slow. Even on my fastest day, it still was a little bit tricky, especially when you were in the studio, in a darker studio with not as bright. The digital viewfinder you had to get used to it. Not saying it's a bad camera. I'm just saying for what I do, I love the 1DX and the 70-200. I love the ability to zoom in and out. Primes are great for stationary objects. You try chasing a child with a 85 millimeter 1.8, shooting it at 1.8. You might get one of the eyeballs in focus, or an eyelash, and then by the time you're at the other end of the eyeball, it's out of focus. the 2.8, the 70 to 200 2.8 gets me what I need to get for the majority of my sessions, especially with children. They're running around, they're moving. When I shot film, you know, I was shooting on Hasselblad film. They were sitting stationary, and I could get some very classic looking things. That was 20 years ago. As I started to have kids, I saw life differently. You know, you see little nuances when they're having breakfast, or you see them doing little things during the day. Well, I needed to adapt the way that I shot because I wanted to get that from my clients. I wanted to capture those feelings and moments in time. And when I picked up a camera, when I went to the 70 to 200, it just worked nicely. I could shift backgrounds way out. I usually shot the thing at 200 millimeter. Very rarely did I go be under that. I just loved that look. I would back up, I would get in, let the background just shift into, you know, just a nice, beautiful tone. I was able to lock on focus. You know, it's very quick. Like I can go boom. You know, it's very quick, depending on what I'm focusing on. And I can move around, I can adapt to the situation. But that's what I mainly use. The other lens that I used a lot back in the day was a 24 to 70 2.8 L. Still use it, love it. 16 to 35, use that for weddings, for some of the candles that I get. So those, between those three lenses, there's nothing wrong with getting those really great one-up lenses like a 200 f2. You know, those are very specific lenses. Now, there's nothing wrong with the primes. They're great. You just have to adapt the way you shoot. I don't like to crop after the fact. I want to crop the way I see it, the way I feel it in the camera. I want to go back afterwards and go, oh, I like this little spot because I was using a 50 millimeter and the shot is right here. Whereas you're taking this and you didn't want to move to get that because it was gone. With a zoom, boom, I got it. Whereas you're going to crop, you're going to lose quality, yada, yada, yada. And that's why I am a firm believer in the zoom. Again, there's a time and place for other lenses. But we're talking about portraiture. We're talking about photographing clients where you need to have an end result. And my end result is an image on the wall in a canvas or a beautiful hand-printed piece or an acrylic, anything of that sort. Where it's going 24 by 36, it's got to look beautiful. And I believe even now there's this, I just feel like there's so much out there about sharpness, sharpness, sharpness. Sometimes things are too sharp. Man, we used to have to throttle things back on film because the Zeiss lenses were so sharp. We put soft focus filters in front of it. It looked dreamy and all of that, but again, it was so sharp. There's a nice balance between sharpness and softness. I feel that I achieved that with the 70 to 200 so that when they go large on the wall, the print doesn't fall apart. So that's pretty much what I use for the mainstay of the portrait world is this camera. Again, this is a version 1DX, 70 to 200 2.8 image stabilizing version 2, 24 to 70 2.8, and the 16 to 35. And that's what I use, plus my 500. Now, that's not to say that I don't use the 500 for portraits, because I do. I have, and it's beautiful. I've photographed families with this lens, and it is extraordinarily gorgeous. You won't get a look like it with any other lens. It just isn't going to happen. There's a dreaminess about it that just shifts immediately out of focus, but it's got about that much width and to be in focus, and then immediately that background turns into tone, cream, whatever you want it to. It's beautiful. So check out my website. You can see some examples of my work if you're not familiar with it. Many of those images were shot with these cameras, the 70-200 2.8 with that lens. Very few with a wide angle, very few. It's just my style. That's what I feel where I sit. Now, The next video is going to be a short video, and it's going to be about, I took the A9 for a little test drive to compare it to the 1DX on the 500mm for that facet of photography. Not saying for portrait, but for wildlife. It was kind of interesting what I found out, how it felt to me, and my conclusion on that, but I'll save that for the next YouTube video. Thanks for checking in. I know I tend to ramble, but I like to tell stories, and I like to give a little more in-depth of, I'm using this camera because, you know, I want to make it from life experience, not just a year of using it or two. We're talking decades of using cameras, knowing what I like, what works well, what doesn't work, and really the job that I'm given in photographing people, portraits, their soul. I got to be on my game, and I have to have equipment that is going to be able for me to do that in a split second. And that's why I'm using this setup. Again, check out my YouTube channel for the other video. There will be more to come sooner than the last one. So thanks for checking in. And again, check out my Instagram. I'm always putting stuff on there on a daily basis. Cerezo Man on Instagram. Facebook, Michael Cerezo, just search that. And